Hello, I'm Jonathan Bowman-Perks and welcome back to the Inspiring Leadership series and at my favourite time of the week. I'm very lucky to have an old friend of mine, Lieutenant General Sir Nick Pope, who has had an incredibly successful army career, ending up as the Deputy Chief of the General Staff. And Nick was a fellow Royal Signals officer with me in our early careers. A lovely story that he wanted to go to Bristol, but he was a Bristol reject and actually ended up going to Cambridge, which is a lovely understatement, to read economics at Jesus College, Cambridge. And then on into a career within the army, which I'll get him to talk a bit about the phases of his career. But now coming to the end of his time and on to his civilian career, which is coming next for him, and there's many options that he could do. But Nick, great to have you here. Tell me about the stage of your career. I love the way you described it.
So Jonathan, thanks for having me here today, and it's great that we start off moving into your career with a sort of strategic failure. So a Bristol reject, and it's a great way of actually starting off, which has been a long and particularly undistinguished career. But I like to think about a career in three parts. So part one of the career, the first decade or so, was in field operations jobs, at regimental duty, doing jobs that we would call junior command appointments. The second phase, the middle phase, is really learning about the trappings of the bureaucracy. So staff appointments in the Ministry of Defence and across the Army, but particularly in my case in the Ministry of Defence, dispelling soul-crushing negativity upon the masses. And then the last third has been really in strategic leadership positions, leading leaders to take our great public sector organisation forward.
Great. And in those leaders that you've worked with, you were talking about people who inspired you and what you learned from them. Who would be, in your story, who would be the leader that inspired you, and what was it that they did that others who are listening might take some bits out of that and go, that's something I could aspire to do?
So I want to talk about David Richards. David Richards finished as Chief of the Defence Staff, now Lord Richards of First Monceau. But I want to take you back to 2007, when NATO was going to go to Afghanistan and expand to have control of the regions in Afghanistan. And David Richards was at that stage in command of a corps headquarters in Germany, the Allied Rapid Reaction Corps. And I think I want to pin up three things about how I think he achieved success in that particular mission. The first thing was about developing a team. David was brilliant at bringing out team practices, giving empowerment to people, letting them do their own roles. He trusted his organisation. By trusting it, his organisation responded to him. The second thing that I think he was very good at was stakeholder engagement. I think Kipling talked about talking with crowds and keeping your virtue, or walking with kings and not losing your common touch. That was David Richards to a man. He could actually talk to President Karzai, he'd be friends with Tony Blair, he talked to the Prime Minister of Canada, but equally he could sit next to Signal Brigade at the table at lunchtime and engage with her fantastically. And the third thing that he had, I think, was the ability to crystallise on what was important. So he spent a lot of time working out what the mission was going to be, understanding the purpose, communicating that purpose to people, and ensuring that actually we measured our progress against that purpose. So mission, team, and then the individual himself.
Brilliant. And the one that many people are often interested in, because I've made more mistakes than I can shake a stick at, was what we learn for when things don't work out, particularly for ourselves. So you've got an example corporate level, but could you also, after that, perhaps tell a personal one? But what have you seen corporate-wise, or in whatever order?
I'll give you a couple, actually. So the first thing from a corporate level, I'm lucky enough to be chair of the Gurkha Welfare Trust, which is about delivering welfare support to old pensioners in Nepal. The operational circumstances have changed over the last 5 or 10 years. The diaspora is increasingly getting older, its needs are changing. So what was a transactional relationship dispensing individual pensions through area welfare centres has become over time a need for medical support, medical provision. So that requires doctors and nurses and healthcare assistants. Great, fantastic way of delivering, but what we've done is to disenfranchise are old Gurkha officers who were there dispensing responsibility. And I think along the way we lost the ability to communicate effectively with those old people. Our mistake as an organisation, we've got to do something to rectify it. On an individual level, I've had a number of 360-degree reports throughout my career, and people say two things to me. One, you're arrogant, and two, you never communicate enough, and they're absolutely right. I sometimes have this ability to try and do everything myself and not use the team to its best effect, and so over the last 4 or 5 years I think I've tried really hard to get inside people's minds and to talk to people, to listen to people, and to make them feel part of the journey of progress.
Okay, it's nice for you to be clear about that. And what would be a couple of final tips? We've got about 2 or 3 minutes, so we've got a bit of time. What would be a couple of final tips that you'd give to our audience about some top tips that business leaders could apply as they aspire to go up, or perhaps they're CEOs or COOs of operations? What have you found has been good advice you've been given that's worked for you as you've done some really demanding jobs throughout your time in the forces?
So I've just written my sort of soliloquy to the army, basically, for the General Staff newsletter, and I finished it with 3 little sub-phrases which have characterised my last 2 or 3 years in the job I've been doing. And it was: stay positive, embrace challenge, and smile more. And let me pick up each of those 3 if I can. So positivity, words that I try and avoid: uncertainty, fear, blockage, disenfranchisement. Words that I do like: challenge, energy, positivity, enthusiasm. And the more you can concentrate on the latter 4 words and marginalise the first 4 words, so much the better. When I talk about embracing challenge, I was once asked about what I thought about criticism. My immediate reaction was to do this. It's a military thing, to hide behind yourself. And actually, if you go to some of the really good consultancy organisations, they talk about positive criticism. And we've tried really hard in the Army over the last 2 or 3 years to come up with a challenge culture, to enable youngsters in the organisation to be able to have the confidence and actually the opportunity to come back to the senior leadership to say, hey, come on, that's not quite right.
Yeah.
And that's worked really, really
good.
effectively.
Really.
And most effectively when you get the most junior people in the organisation getting the opportunity to speak to the senior leadership.
Really important.
And then smile more. Because if you're delivering a change programme and it's not fun, then you haven't got it quite right.
Nick, thank you very much. As always, real
Great
pleasure
to
to
see you
see
again,
you.
Jonathan.
Congratulations on an incredibly successful career. And whoever is lucky
Average
enough to,
career.
whoever,
We'll see.
to many of them, whoever's lucky enough to get you next will be very fortunate. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, pleasure.